I'm an investigator, but not in any traditional sense. I spent the past couple years memorizing the streets and geotagging businesses in Mumbai. I also spent some time trying to define the line between formal and informal product lines for Colombia's cartels. Sometimes that line is pretty hard to define. I spend as much time as possible in areas with high levels of informal economic activity. What does this look like? This is a street scene from a city in Hong Kong, or a part of Hong Kong. These markets are pretty common across China, but also around the world. People go every day to buy things like groceries or basic household items. This is where the informal economy meets consumers, and there's nothing sinister about it. In India, about 84% of employment comes from the informal economy. That's a little bit more than 4 out of 5 jobs. We see them working in manufacturing, producing a lot of the clothes that we buy from retailers around the world. We see them working in food services, in construction. They make pottery for tiles on roofs. We see them everywhere. And we see the informal economy in the United States as well. Industries like childcare are very easy to keep off record, paid in cash, tax-free. Informal businesses are businesses that operate outside of government regulation, either completely or in some small capacity. And honestly, sometimes business regulation is really hard to follow. Banks have entire departments devoted to following legal regulation in the United States, for example. And there are some industries that are just not very good fits for the laws that exist on the books. Some informal businesses are massive and very complicated, like Mexico's cartels, while others are much more local. I like to study informal businesses because they teach me about resilience, and this is in large part because they are so devoted to their local communities. Without local communities, informal businesses cannot survive. The community is at once the customer base and the critics of every business. If they lose their support, these businesses will no longer prosper. They can no longer grow. What I see when I do my work is that we find ecosystems. We find communities that support business, and business that supports the needs of local communities. Today, I would like to share a few examples of where I see reinvention and resilience in the informal economy. My first example comes from the United States. In many places, workers are barred from entry for various reasons. Thus, they carve out their own spaces in the informal economy and create a value add in their own ecosystems. I know this firsthand because I came to the United States from Mexico as a child. While I had a pathway to legal citizenship through my American mother, a lot of our friends and family members will never have that pathway. Instead, they carve out their own spaces in the economy and develop different types of industries. We see undocumented workers in the United States picking fruit, working in the service industry, on construction sites, and so many other places that are so integral to the US economy that we pass them by and they go unnoticed. There are 11.7 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, every single one of them working in some capacity in the informal economy. The time that we notice them most is when they are no longer there. In 2011, Alabama and a series of other southern states passed a series of increasingly restrictive immigration laws. Overnight, it seems, children were pulled from schools, and the next day when construction workers who were Americans appeared at some of the construction sites, or people in the service industry appeared at the jobs, they realized that suddenly a lot of the workforce was gone. Alabama had to acknowledge it had a labor shortage. The laws became less restrictive over time and workers came back to work, because otherwise this economy was on the verge of collapsing. What this lesson teaches us is that informal economies and formal economies coexist. They cooperate. They learn from each other. And as our system stands today, one cannot exist without the other.